very much for spending time with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Dan, this is Ruth.
The following participant has left the conference.
Chris Bird.
Yes, who was speaking? Was that...
This is Ruth. I was wondering, will he come anywhere near Boston in the fall? Because that would be a good opportunity to do some further talking when we're
right
at the Leading Age Conference.
We can find that out. We'll look into that.
Yeah, this is Jack. I think I can say Leading Age excludes Brookdale. When they were... Well, you'll recall the tension that we had when they were in Nashville, and they were not really fully welcome there. So whether he would go, but I think it's, yeah, and I think that's short-sighted on the part of Leading Age, and maybe it's Achilles' heel. But that I doubt very much that he would make a special effort to be in Boston where he's not really welcome.
That's too bad, because it sounds like a real rich avenue to explore.
Okay. Friends, thank you very much. I think that was helpful. I appreciate the fact that we were able to keep the conversation within a half hour, and still it was a productive session, and we will follow up with it. And Jack, thank you very much for taking the initiative to make this possible. It's really been a very good thing for us. Okay, now let's get back to item 4. Pete, I think we were about finished. We had sort of covered almost everything. And Pete, do you have any dangling concern before I turn to item number 5?
Well, I guess when we talk about the program, I had just begun to mention the possibility of having an estate planning attorney give us about 5 or 10 minutes on a topic that doesn't get much publicity, and that is how your executor or family can get into your Facebook account or your email account or anything else where you've got passwords. And
right.
It's a non-monetary question, but nonetheless, it may be something that the family would like to do.
Right. So I don't know how anyone else feels, but certainly a 10 or 15-minute sort of dialogue about this could be accommodated in the time available. It probably would be useful to many people. So, okay. Pete, if you can find a resource person who is willing to do it within 10 or 15 minutes, I'm a little worried about making it longer than that, especially if we do succeed in getting Steve Magg or the Blue Cross person.
Yeah.
So that sounds good, and I don't hear any objections from anyone else, do I?
No, I think the idea of the Bill of Rights, Steve Magg, and 10 or 15 minutes on this would make a powerful afternoon program.
Great. Okay. And, of course, there are other business items that we...
Like Stephen Magg or
Stephen Magg.
King fellow?
Get Stephen Magg. Yes. Get Stephen Magg. Absolutely. And make it close to you.
We identify Stephen Magg as the first choice.
Absolutely.
So that's good. Friends, can we turn now to item number 5, which is also a very important item. And I wonder, Bob, is it appropriate for us to ask you to make an introductory comment about this?
Well, just the fact that we now have 255 NaCCRA members in the state of Washington, and we have had 2 meetings, one of which you attended, in which there was a steering committee appointed and the decision made to move forward. And the meeting on January 15, the Assemble group adopted a mission statement and bylaws. You've circulated the mission statement and reviewed the bylaws, and they're ready to go. The steering committee is now ready to nominate officers to get the thing going, and they I've had 2 or 3 points of view from the board. Walt Boyd said, just tell them. But I think that the people in the Washington State, NaCCRA Washington developing, they wanted to let you know fully what's going on, who's doing it, who's involved, the mission statement, and just say, here's where we are. and that's why. So I gave that to Dan and gave it to Jack, and Jack and Dan worked out a motion here. And since I have a self-interest, I won't go any further.
I wonder if anyone has any questions for Bob or any comments about the proposed motion.
What's the motion?
It's in the agenda under item 5 on page 2. It's at the top of page 2.
No, thank you.
Any comments?
Just
Any
to
questions?
congratulate Bob on wonderful work to make this happen. It just kudos to you, Bob.
Thank you very much. I was out there and I was very, very impressed at the spirit that existed among those people who were gathered for this new enterprise, at their commitment, and excuse me. And I was also very impressed by the enormous admiration, respect, and affection they have for Bob. So he's been very critical to making this happen.
Absolutely.
I have a question about the wording.
Yes.
In line 2, the word associations as plural, is that what intended?
It's what association.
I think it should be singular. I'm afraid that's a typographical error. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for catching it, Marlene. We know an editor when we see one. Thank you. Okay, I don't hear any further discussion, and so I'm going to
I'd like
ask
to ask a question before we vote on this.
Sure.
Jean
Sure,
Hurley
Jean.
here.
Go ahead.
They are going to become a NaCCRA member, but they're not going to be paying state dues like Virginia's paying state dues?
Interesting question. Bob, can you explain that to us?
Well, I'll quote the president of NaCCRA, who came out and said that for the first year, since we're still electing officers and getting underway, the state dues would not come until the end of the first year. But yes, they will pay it. In fact, they may pay it early because people have been very generous. But we didn't want to put the pressure on. We wanted to put the emphasis on the mission, getting it together, which we've been working on for 3 years, and not saying that's going to cost you $500. Mm-hmm. I think when we have the membership meeting on March 15, that we need to look at the whole way we approach developing startup NaCCRA chapters and revisit our very structure of fees and membership fees and stuff.
This is a very critical issue, which Judy Moss and the bylaws committee will be considering at a meeting in March. The one thing about the Washington situation that to me is really critical is that at present the membership of the state chapter and the membership of NaCCRA are congruent, which is quite different than exists in a place like Florida, where only a few of the relatively small proportion of the FLAGRA members are also NaCCRA members, and this model that we have in Washington is much more promising for NaCCRA's future than the earlier models. So we'll have to be giving a lot of careful thought to this in the bylaws committee. But it's a good question, Gene, that you raise.
We're going to continue to put the same application on the Lifeline as we're putting on now.
I guess
we will look at it.
I think it will be changed eventually, hopefully soon.
But until we make a decision, it can't be, in other words, we can't change it until the board reaches some kind of decision about it.
Mr. President?
Yes, go ahead, Bennett.
Yes, I just wanted to, from a headquarters standpoint, myself and Kim and Will are primarily the folks that work on NaCCRA from a communication standpoint with folks around the country. And,
right.
Obviously there's been a lot of exchange about Illinois and Ohio as other examples. I just encourage the board to look at this in a big picture way, in the sense that, as you've got these groups developing at the grassroots level, they don't, quote-unquote, have an infrastructure. They don't have a revenue stream, if you will, at the early stages, yet they're out recruiting and generating membership revenue for NaCCRA. It's just to be open to some creative ways that, I hate to say a waiting period, but something that allows them to, build the infrastructure to where they could pay dues. But I do think, some of the folks have potentially felt like it was a barrier, like what comes first? Does the state dues come first? Then we start recruiting individual members. But when the iron's hot, you obviously want to help fuel that fire. So I know it's difficult because I come from one of the states, Florida, where we've been paying dues since the beginning every year as a state member, and so I know certainly we don't necessarily want to give people a free ride, but I also know that as these other states are trying to catch up to us, meaning the other states that have formal state associations, that we all win in the long run. So I just encourage the board to look at it in an open fashion.
Yeah, Dan.
Can you answer this question for me? Are the people in Washington paying state dues?
Yeah.
Local dues?
I'd like to address that, if I may, Gene. This is Jack Cumming. Historically, NaCCRA was formed by state associations, and they ponied up what were called state dues to finance NaCCRA. As it evolved, NaCCRA has become more individual memberships. Now, when we come into these places, they produce a large number of new individual members in NaCCRA, and then they find out, gosh, we owe additional money. And so what's happened is that we're losing Ohio and we're losing Illinois, where we had development, because suddenly they say, hey, we're bringing all these members and money to NaCCRA, and all NaCCRA wants is additional money, and we don't have the financing for it, and we're not getting the benefit from NaCCRA, so we'll just go on our own. Do we really need to be part of NaCCRA? So we've got to think this through so that we don't just create barriers because of the history of NaCCRA and say, well, what was good enough for me is going to be good enough for you, lest we drive people away.
Okay, that's absolutely right.
This is all, I'm struggling here a little bit in that this is very relevant, very germane conversation. It does anticipate the work of the bylaws committee, which is going to occur next month. So I don't want to sort of duplicate or spin too many wheels, but this is but the points that Gene and Jack and Judy and Bob have raised are really critical. We have to sort it out, and I'm worried about the 41 states which are not yet organized, and how we're going to deal with those creatively in a way that builds NaCCRA's strength and also allows financing for local state activities. So we have to work on that very carefully. Yes,
Dan Nicholson here. Let me make a closing statement. Dan saw here, face-to-face, with a number of people. These are generous people. The foundation at one CCRC has already contributed $500 to NaCCRA. We have not applied that to any one purpose. We simply said for the startup costs of NaCCRA Washington, they are generous people, and if we harp on this dues thing, the dues becomes a barrier to development, and it becomes a downer. It was a downer in Illinois, it's a downer in Ohio, and we've got to relook at the whole dues structure. But anyway, I just want to tell you we need to get on with it and have the board say, it looks good to us, thank you.
Right. Do people feel comfortable? Well, let me ask this. Is there a motion that the corrected motion that's in the agenda, is there a motion that we approve that?
Well, Dan, this is Jack, as secretary. I don't know what the correction is. I think...
The S out of association.
Take the S out of association.
Oh, okay. Because I think we absolutely want to welcome our growth.
Okay.
If we're...
Great.
How could we be opposed to
Is there
it?
a motion?
It's there.
I'll make the motion. I move the wording in the agenda.
Is there a second? Second. Who seconded it?
Gene.
Gene. Okay. Okay, Jack has offered the motion and Gene has seconded it. Is there, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great, the motion carries.
Now, my one postscript is, with Washington State having all the members of the state being members of, can we ask Bennett to facilitate all the members of NaCCRA becoming members of NaCCRA in the next 12 months?
Thank you.
Well, I guess your timing is good or bad depending on how you look at it. I have a NaCCRA board meeting tomorrow.
But
So,
tell them that we propose that Washington State is setting the pace and they could catch up to us.
I understand.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bob, for that suggestion, and thank you, Bennett, for your response. That's great. Okay, we'll turn to item 6, the nominating committee. I don't want to shortchange anything, but I'm really anxious to get to item 7. But anyway, let's go to item 6, the nominating committee. Pete is chair of the nominating committee. I think it is February 6th, which is the deadline for nominations. So probably these nominations may be accumulating in Florida, or maybe they aren't. I don't know. But anyway, Bennett will presumably forward the nominations to Pete early next week, and the nominating committee get to work on figuring out the best possibilities. I guess, Pete, you and I will have to work a little bit on figuring out how many vacancies on the board actually exist, so that you know how many names to bring forward. Are there any other comments about the nominations process?
Mr. President, the only thing I can say at this point is, based on the Lifeline, we have not gotten any submissions at the Tallahassee office as of yet.
Okay. So, board members, you might want to start recruiting. I've spoken to 2 people I thought would be hotshot candidates, and they're not available, unfortunately. So all of us should try to forward nominations to Bennett, or at this point it could be forwarded directly to Pete. We should really
Well, since Peter's the chairman, it probably should better go to him.
Well, at this point, any nominations springing from our efforts might as well go directly to Pete. I think that's right, Bennett, don't you?
Sure. It's more efficient.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They have received none to this date.
Okay. Well, no one would know to send it to you. But anyway, so all of us scare up some nominations and send them to Pete. And remember, we need a treasurer and a secretary. So scare up members qualified for those jobs. Okay. Any other comments about nominations?
Do we need, isn't Marlene retiring as editor of the Lifeline? No? Yes?
Yes, she is. Jean, we're aware of your generous offer to possibly succeed her, and I hadn't planned to discuss that on today's agenda, but we definitely will be continuing. Marlene, can you remind us what your last issue will be?
I have one issue that's gone to the print setup now, and I'll be doing one more.
Right. So we definitely have to work on this, Jean. Thank you for reminding us that we need a successor to Marlene. Let's work. Let's be mindful of Jean's offer and see if there are any other things we should be considering. But certainly Jean's offer is a wonderful help to us.
And Dan, you also need a webmaster.
Right. Thank you, Jack. Appreciate that. So we have some critical functions to fill.